certainly does.
Hello, hello.
Greetings. What's this picture of this archipelago here? Do you have that?
I think that's Rusty's screen.
Oh yeah, that's if we stay on long enough, that actually the sky actually goes dark. So you know.
Yeah, it did that on mine too. I have the same screensaver.
Do you know where it is?
I think it's in Ireland. Like the those craggy islands up there in Northern Ireland or Wales, Scotland, Great Britain area.
Yeah, Isle Skye and the Falk. Yeah, yeah.
Like that.
I was thinking more like Hawaii, but who knows? No countries. So we're all here.
Okay, Keith, are we ready to start? I mean, do you have anything?
Yeah, we're all set. Just as a reminder, if people can mute their microphones when they're not speaking, and also state your name before you speak, just for the benefit of anybody listening out there in the recording. And the meeting is being recorded to YouTube.
Shall I start?
Just a second. Thank you. I'm just. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Yes.
You can. It says it's muted. So.
Oh. Yeah, we hear you.
Now he's muted. Yeah, Michael's muted now.
All right, I'm back. So we'll start the meeting. Hello, everybody. Call to order. And we'll just go to the first application. Preliminary review, proposed mixed-use building and associated site improvements at 26 and 38 Old Stonington Road. Okay, so assume everybody has some form of document to look at there. And with that, Rusty, take it away. Start your presentation.
All right, very good. Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity to the free exchange of ideas early in the design development process. That's where we are. We have a variance hearing tomorrow, but we wanted to sort of get the ball rolling to see if what I'm, proposing is in harmony with the heritage and the scale of massing and that sort of thing. What I wanted to do is just sort of run through, sort of the background information before I actually get to what you'll be looking for, which is the architectural design review. Let's see if I can get this. Okay, this is, let me slide it so you can see it. This is the area we're talking about. Upper left is the Latazori project, the train tracks below that. And then Route 1 runs right through when they straightened it out in the mid-60s, leaving the properties we're talking about, which are outlined in dashed red lines, thick red lines here, the fire station to the east, and then the restaurant to the west. They left them on very narrow lots, so we're having to get a variance to allow us to go closer to Old Stonington Road. On advice of the planning staff, they said, well, keep the 40-foot setback from the Route 1 side, and that's what we're intending to do. Right now, this is sort of the lost stepchild of the GC 60 zones in town. There's a lot of vacant space, although it's starting to be filled in. The property, the upper left, where it says mixed retail residential, we got a zoning amendment to allow us to put residential in that. That had been removed as an allowable use, so about 20 years ago, 18 years ago. We still have sort of the fly on the wall here, the vacant restaurant. The old Sailor Ed's has been vacant. It's very different. The building's pretty deteriorated, and it's below the flood elevation. The fire station is to the east of the site, and the restaurant is to the west. And this just gives you a better idea. Where we're proposing to build is sort of in the middle of the original Densmore parcel. They have a contract to purchase the Christmas shop in this location. You can see it's very low. There are tidal wetlands, surrounding to the sort of the south and east. The fortunate thing is where we're looking to locate the building is the highest elevation, essentially anywhere around there. Just to give you a more precise sense, this is the site. The two Densmore oil terminal buildings are to the east here, to the right. The middle one is the oil storage facility. Trucks come in Stonington Road, come in under a opening there, and then they pump the fuel into storage tanks. And the remainder of that building, the other building is garage. I didn't turn that off. Sorry about that. And then you can see the rock. I'm sorry about that. Still don't have it off. Off. Okay, good. Sorry. This is the building, the parcel that Densmore Oil is buying, and this building will be removed. Give you a sense of what we're dealing with here. If I can get this to slide. This is the area directly to the west, the back of the Dog Watch restaurant. And you can see this black SUV over here is parked on the Christmas shop side, but well within the side setback. If I go to the next picture here, you can see that same truck and the roofs and fencing and the existing building. Okay, and this marker right here is where the property line is of that parcel that was purchased out of the Densmore properties to build this shop back in the 60s. Now, if I continue to go to the east, this is essentially, you can see this is the high point. You can barely see some rock outcropping there. And the area we would be building on would be to the right of that. There's a 30-inch caliper oak here, which we're retaining and trying to keep the building outside the crown of that. There's another 26-foot oak over here, which is actually on the highway right away. You can see it's well treed on the Route 1 side. If we go to the very east side, this is the screening for the oil storage building. You can see the structure behind here, the existing Christmas shop, which will be removed. There's our 30-inch oak, and you can see there's parking, essentially where parking will be. None of the parking or driveways or just about anything about the existing Christmas shop is conforming with zoning at this point. And then this looks back to the corner of that existing building. What we're proposing to do, the Dog Watch is to the left over here. There's a row of arborvitae existing on the Dog Watch. It's actually in the highway right away. We're proposing to buffer what's going on there, which is unsightly. A row of arborvitaes on the west side, and then if we go over to the east side over here, there's a row of arborvitae on the angle down in the flood elevation. This is the flood elevation here, where we're trying to keep the building out of that. And it will be at 14.5. It's an 11 flood zone to the right. And then there's that 30-inch oak, the crown of which we're trying to stay outside of. I'll talk a little more about the landscaping when I come back to that. We would be looking for a waiver on a landscape architect. The site is pretty well vegetated right now. We're essentially building in the middle, but we can talk about that as we proceed. Before we get to the architecturals, I'll just give you a quick glimpse of what the building is. The Route 1 side is in the bottom. You'd enter from the upper left over here for the driveway, and there'd be parking. Densmore would be taking about 3/5, 3/4, I don't know, of the ground floor. There'd be a remaining retail or rental office space. The parking entrance is in the center. One of the things we're trying to do is get, depending on what the ledge configuration is out over in here, we'd like to get an interior stair to a basement in this area for utilities. If not, we may have to do a basement access, which we would screen. The second floor, oops, that's not the second floor. I'll leave that open. The second floor essentially is two bedroom apartments, stairway in the center, vaulted ceiling, porches in each corner to take advantage of the wintertime views out to Fisher's Island Sound. Not much to be said there. The crux of the discussion today will be the building, I believe. From the Route 1 side, this is what we're looking at. Residential entrance, possibly with a slightly different treatment to sort of take away from the length of the building. It's a fairly long building along the Route 1 side, fairly narrow on the east and west sides because of the setbacks we have. What we're looking to do as far as materials, if I can find them here, I just had them open. As far as, let's see if I can shrink that down a bit, that's better. Basically, the roof would be sort of conventional, composition shingles. We're looking at hardboard siding, probably a hardy plank, probably 7 or 8 inch to weather, only to try to take away the more horizontal lines we have, the longer the building appears. So we're trying to reduce that. In the gable ends, we're proposing the shingle side, the hardy shingle side product, just to give it a little slightly different texture. Possibly the same. This is up in the air right now, whether we would do this to sort of delineate it as the residential entrance and try to break the length on the, let's see, 10-inch corner boards, 9-inch rakes, fiberglass columns with little covered entryways for each of the, the 3 access doors on the south side. On the east side towards Densmore Oil, this is where the Densmore office would be. They have an open plan office in this area and then a private office, owner's office, so they'd have doors out to a patio in that area. The thing I kind of like is for the porch railings, what I was thinking is a Paulopi cap and then taking 2x2 PVC balusters and turning them on the 45 to give a little more, a little more oomph to it rather than the, the spindles that'll give it a, the same 4-inch spacing, but it'll give it a little more mass. Let's see what else I have there. Yeah, I think I mentioned 10-inch corner boards, probably be 8-inch fascias with molding at the bottom, 9.5-inch rakes. Aluminum gutters and downspouts. As we go through site plan, we'll be having to deal with rainwater infiltration where we have a lot of ledge and we're not sure what we have. We hope to do test holes fairly early on in the process. The windows would be Marvin Essential, which used to be Marvin Integrity windows in a 2/2 pattern. You can see in the right there. And then I mentioned the fiberglass, and we do Therma-Tru fiberglass doors. The office doors would be, in a pattern similar to this, and the residential door would just, be a 2-panel half glazed. Probably mail slots on either sides of the doors. Let's see what else. As far as the signs, we're only allowed 1 freestanding sign. So what we're proposing is, let me get back to that, is a freestanding sign as you come in. All the traffic's going to come from the west here, from the left. So all the traffic will come in. We felt an angled sign in that location made the most sense. And then on the building, there would be signs to delineate the 2 commercial tenants, which you can see here. So basically there'd be, signs visible barely visible from Route 1 because the building's about 75 feet from the shoulder of the road. And the tenant, basically the signs would be, crown molded with gooseneck lights on the building. They'd be, sized to the maximum size, to the maximum size, well, slightly less, 14 where 18 is allowed. And then the idea is Densmore at some point may take over the whole building, in which case we would remove the lower sign, but they wanted to have the option. I had it mounted on the building, but they felt that was a more flexible way to approach it. As far as lighting, we're at a preliminary stage. What we're looking to do is get some feedback today. And if we don't get the variance tomorrow night, then we go back, we have to go to Plan B. But if, assuming that goes well, we submit an application to you and, with the waiver and whatever, suggestions we have today, and then go from there. We're a little bit, there's a number of details we obviously haven't worked out. One of the things is the lighting and site lighting, and I have some thoughts on that, which when we come back at a future time, we'd be able to look at. So basically, we'd be looking for a landscape waiver, because we get back to the site plan and get some of the pictures going again here. Oh, that's open. Where are we here? Here we go. You can see in the upper left here, the sites, we're trying to maintain sort of what I would call the, sort of the meadow appearance in the yard. We want to keep, good solar access to both the offices and the apartments. It's pretty well ringed with trees. We would be adding, like I say, arborvitae at each side. And then our intent is to provide native planting, obviously. We're looking at arborvitae, 5 foot tall on the angle on the east side here, and then on the west side along the back of the dog watch establishment. Once again, here's our 30-inch oak, which the arborvitae would come up to, staying out of the crown. Proposing American holly at the corners of the building, as well as at the center where we have where the two gable roofs come down to a sloping gable the other direction. And then horizontal creeping juniper, excuse me, Jupiter's a planet. Juniperus horizontalis, which grows 1 or 2 feet tall, 4 to 8 feet wide, sort of around, along the street side and around the parking. And then we would, be open to suggestions. We do have a bike rack, pervious pavers where we have to have walkways, and possibly pervious pavers over here, depending on what our drainage situation works out in terms of what we can infiltrate. I did mention the possibility, which we're not happy about, but maybe the only way we can get basement access, which would be fenced in with a board fence, and then a garbage can enclosure. Same thing. Get back to that. I think I closed that one. I'm going too fast. Yell at me or something, because this is a whole new, it's the first one of these I've done. The fence would be a pine board fence with posts with copper tops and a little bit of molding, and to conceal both the potential basement access as well as the garbage cans. And that's, essentially where I am.
Okay, well, thank you. That was thorough. And I think we should open this up for discussion with the committee. So does anyone want to start out with questions or comments? One key conversation will be about the waiver of the landscape architect. I don't know if anyone has any ideas on that.
Yeah, that was in my notes as my first comment. I know as a board we've been a bit reluctant to give that waiver for a few different reasons, but at first I got the impression that you know, a lot of the existing vegetation was going to remain, but now it kind of sounds like it's a little bit more involved, which, you know, I don't know how comfortable I would be as far as setting a precedent of giving that, you know, landscape architect waiver, because it's that much harder to enforce it for the next project.
Understood. We do have a landscape architect on the commission who's actually present tonight. He might have a comment. Oh,
I think you're muted, Chris.
what's the sign language for unmute?
I think you go to the sharing your screen at the top.
Chris?
I unmuted you.
Okay.
Well, we still can't hear you.
Does he know what the problem is?
I don't know. He doesn't appear to be muted, but we're obviously not hearing anything.
Maybe he could.
Maybe
You know, there
speakers.
is a chat function too on this, where if you put your cursor to the bottom and click on the little like cartoon bubble thing. So Chris, you can
Chat.
you can type what you're thinking to everybody. And at the bottom, a little thing comes up to the right, a little screen.
I got it.
And you can decide who you want to talk to. So you can click everyone. And then you can type it.
This is Jenny. Could you read it aloud?
Now, Keith, you're muted.
Now I'm muted.
There you go.
Yeah, so I'll read it aloud just so people on the phone can hear it.
Yeah, I just sent him a message. There he is.
Now Keith's muted.
Yeah, I did that on purpose so you wouldn't hear my rustling sounds.
Okay.
So, Chris, what you can do too is use the dial in on the phone using the call-in number. Which is on the agenda.
Hey, Chris. Okay. I mean, do you have your... Okay. You can talk to me again. Is your mic on your laptop? Okay. Yeah, right. So Chris says that he's tried everything,
Okay.
and nothing works. So it may be something on his laptop. It's maybe the mic is not
Yeah.
assigned right.
There's the call-in number, which if you just call in the regular telephone too, which is 1-408-418-9388. And then you put in the meeting number access code, which is on the agenda, which is 129-905-5124.
Okay. Let me get that information and see what that works.
And actually, if you can see the chat thing, Sergio put that information up there to everyone. If you go to the chat function.
Hello.
Hey, we got you.
Okay.
Great.
Apologize for that
No problem.
technical. And we will proceed with the phone. And if you could just mute me, Kate. Thank you.
Mute you.
All right. I was going to concur with Chris in the concern about not having a landscape plan. Can we hear now?
Yes. Yes.
All right. I think given the amount of new planting material proposed, that we would all benefit from seeing a little bit further detail and some discussion about the planting plan.
Okay.
Well, I think also the water gardens or the native plant materials, I think, is an important conversation.
All right. Anything else? Chris?
I'm going to just turn the volume down here for a second because I'm getting a feedback, but.
Okay. Anything else, Chris?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Okay.
Just on those two issues, if I'm still on
Well,
board.
can we, Rusty, can you just let us make our comments and then
sorry.
you can respond? That we'll get through a lot quicker that way. Chris, I think, and Chris and Chris, can you hear me all right? Okay.
Yes.
I think that our regulation is that we have a licensed landscape architect involved. Is that your understanding? I mean, is that what we're saying here?
That is our understanding, and I think this project warrants that.
Okay. Now let's see. So Jenny, are you?
Yes.
Are you there?
This is Jenny. I would be in agreement, especially being so close to wet areas, that anything to support the natural landscape and expert for that would be helpful.
Okay. Leslie?
I would tend to agree, especially when you're putting a building of this size. You know, architecturally, I like the building, and I wouldn't want the landscaping toned down or optimized for the scale that we're seeing of this building here. And the plantings just seem very minimal just to throw something in. I'd like to see it maybe a little bit more thought out and so
This
way
is
to improve.
Jenny again.
Okay.
Interrupting Leslie, sorry. Jenny, just the lines of proposed arborvitae hedge is pretty dull and can be almost city-like to me. It may be a more natural blend of planting.
Okay. Mark, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, couple things. I would first of all, tonight, be in support of the variance. I think I understand the mechanical and structural reasons why they're asking for that. I don't know if that's anything we want to provide to Rusty to take to tomorrow's meeting or whenever the meeting was coming up. Also, Rusty, Lithonia makes a great LED full cutoff parking lot light that people don't even know they're there at Bravo. Lithonia, I can get you the information on that. I know you asked about guidance on that possibly. And I agree with the landscape comments, only to caution that we have seen in the past, 5 or 10 years, aggressive landscape plans that have been lay fallow that don't look so good after a while. So at the same time, something focused. That's a very marine environment there. I run Route 1 all the time, and it's brutal in the winter. So whatever goes there, it has to really be thought out that it's going to be hardy and stand the test of time. Architecturally, I have no problems with the building at all.
Okay, so I think thanks, Mark, and other members there. I think just to focus on the landscape architect issue, that we have consensus that this is not Rusty, the kind of waiver that we can approve. We haven't been approving any waivers on top of that. So it's not only this. But those are some good reasons why we can't. And so, and I can add one or two myself. But I think the bottom line is that we would need to, because of the visibility of this project and the precedent setting of it along Route 1 and this kind of weird shaped sliver of real estate, all the more important is the site development and how that plays out on the two sides. And the two sides being in the old Stonington and Route 1. And, the landscape and design and the architecture, I think in good design are inseparable. And what we have here is a building that really has two fronts, if you will, architecturally. And you develop one of them in the site plan, and the other front toward Old Stonington Road, to me, is inviting a lot more attention, even though it's not primary access, or even in the way you've drawn the elevations, it's not an access for people at all. I think it's something that needs development, and that would be what we would expect kind of through the collaboration between the landscape architect, a good one, and yourself.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, no, I understand your reluctance, and I agree. I mean, a more natural blend of materials and a greater palette, I think, would be beneficial. I had at one point tried to, on the Old Stonington Road side, incorporate some flowering trees, and there was some reluctance on the client's part. One of the things I think Mark alluded to, which I think is really important, is the initial cost and then how much maintenance there is, in terms of ongoing maintenance of a commercial property. But we get that. So yeah, we will proceed in that way. And, I think one of the things Mark, or I think you said was, more attention to the old Stonington Road side. Was sort of, I mean, that's sort of the least interesting of the facades, I'll be the first to admit. And I think with some, more sculptural landscaping on that side, we can, draw attention away from that. And then, I think really the primary facade is the one that's going to be seen the most is the Route 1 side based on the traffic count there. So, we're, pretty happy with that and less happy with the old Stonington Road side. I think landscaping would help that a lot. The fencing that I described, does that seem sufficient to do the screening of the basement access if we need that, as well as the garbage enclosure, the can enclosure?
This is Jenny. Is this on the west side, a possible trash area?
No, it's on the Route 1 side. And I think once a landscape architect gets involved, there would be some landscaping around that also, which I'm not, sufficiently skilled to be able to propose. It's once again, we're 70, well, that's about, probably 40 feet from the roadway. So I think, with the fencing, so the cans wouldn't be visible, with some landscaping around it, I think would be, a benefit. There's a signage requirement that any freestanding sign has landscaping around it. I probably wasn't, I'm not as skillful as that. I just, was trying to meet the client's desires to keep it low maintenance and low cost. But I think, that in terms of the building cost, landscaping cost isn't so great. So, I think that those would be a couple of things, yeah, we'd be willing to look at.
Hey, Rusty, this is Chris. Just comment on the landscape design sort of premise. I don't think we're necessarily looking for elaborate or detailed or high maintenance. I think just given the scale or the magnitude of the work, we would like to see more information about the plants being specified. I think you could approach this with a very native, simple palette that wouldn't imply more maintenance, but it would be more appropriate to the site. And I'm looking at your base, and you had mentioned junipers, and I think that might be in a shady location. So I think we need a little more thought about where the native materials are going, and where are the foundation plants. And I think there's an opportunity there to treat the site more holistically and not necessarily burden the client with maintenance.
That's fair enough. Yeah, no, I have no problem with that. I'm not writing the checks, but yeah, no, I'll persuade them of that. I don't see a big problem there.
I have a comment. This is Leslie. From the Stonington Road side, Route 1, you look across the lawn and then you go right into parking. So there's that hardscaping that goes right up to the building. So maybe a little bit of softening along some of those edges would help with the landscaping on that side, because there's so much blacktop,
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're quite a bit lower there. I see your point. The roadway at Route 1 is lower, so you're not going to see the pavement from there.
Okay. And then also the fencing that you described, did you say that was wood, like
That would be wood.
a cedar or pine?
Cedar. No, I said pine before. It'd be cedar.
Yeah, okay, good. That's nice.
One of the things I actually am familiar, Mark, if you're still there, with the Thonia lighting you were talking about. And one of the things is, we haven't, I've contacted a site engineer, and, some of the planning details, what would obviously now come from the landscape architect. Oh, where'd you go? One of the things on the, now my thing doesn't want to work. There we go. There is, and it's not terribly attractive, and I'm not sure what to do about it. If you look in the upper right picture here, you'll see this, the Wilcox Point or Latimer Point roadway used to come up, and that was a light on, if you look here, at the sort of at the southeast corner of the dog watch property, there is a pole light that would light a portion of the site. I believe that's owned by Southern New England Telephone or somebody. Because the actual power lines that go to Latimer Point come here, because this is where the roadway ended up before they took Route 1. It came out to this point. So we were looking at, similar lights to what Mark described, the Lithonia lights. So, now it's not working. No. It doesn't want to go. Okay, it doesn't like me. Let me go back here for a second. Yeah, that pole light I was talking about is in the lower left here. And we would provide another light, somewhere at the entryway and then at the end of the new parking, which is actually further out. But as we, proceed with the engineering, we'll get that back for a final hearing once we get the landscape architect lined up with a plan that you could take a look at and review.
Well, that would be great. And I know, Rusty, since this is your first time in front of us, I might just explain what we're looking for from the landscape architect. It's a, what am I trying to say here? I'm looking at your elevations. It's a total site, I guess that's what I'm saying. We'd like the total, as you would, the total site address. So it really is integrated. And so in design, and also particularly so that it gives something back, particularly to the neighbor to the north across Old Stonington Road. And because we find, I think this is fair to say, that a lot of our comments, even though we're architectural review, have as much to do with the site development, disposition of the building and massing, and then what happens outside the building, the approach, and what its public image is. I would say a good amount of our comments focus on that, as opposed to any, in getting way into specific details of materials and all, because it's so important to keep the integrity. And so, any drawings, perspectives, that sections of the site that are relevant in terms of planting, topography. I don't know how much topography there is, probably not that important, but privacy buffers, and certainly so many other things that have been mentioned on site lighting is important. So that's kind of what we're probably left something out of that, but that's the kind of presentation we look at. And then to Chris's point, it really helps, although Chris is the only one that understands it.
Not necessarily.
Well, a really smart choice of and economical choice of plant types and disposition. Something that is more than life, more to life than lighting, I think. So, as you agree, sure. So, that kind of presentation is really going to help us a lot and help us.
Yeah, fair enough. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, so I think I've got enough to go with here. One thing Mark mentioned that I actually had on my list to request was, based on what I presented today in terms of the difficulty of dealing on this site because of its configuration, we could use a little bit of support with the ZBA tomorrow. Is that something to, if I could poll your members, that you might be interested in providing?
Well, I can say that we've never done that, to my knowledge. I mean, we've done other things, but so for us to go on record, you know, as say an illegal abutter would, is kind of a stretch, I think. I mean, I don't really know that much about your hardship, you know. I mean, it's and we're not interested in your hardship, frankly. You know, we got too much else going on.
Well, if we don't get the variance, we're going to have a 20-foot wide building here, which in terms of the massing and the, you know, harmony with Stonington's architectural heritage, you know, I think is, you know, something, I mean, you could at least consider. The reason I say that, let's see here.
20-foot wide building, what? And I understand that because of the setbacks, but isn't that pretty obvious? I mean, you have a hardship that's not imposed by anything you're doing. So,
well, they need, just to give you a sense, this is the drawing. This is the drawing submitted for the variance. And if you look here, you can see these are the two 40-foot setbacks. And that leaves, like I say, you know, a very long, narrow strip. You know, and if we still have to get the same amount of parking, but the building would be half again longer. You know, that's right. No, I get it. You don't have a precedent for doing that. I know in some cases where I've gone to design historic district commissions, they will say, yeah, we understand that particular issue, and we understand that the building would be, you know, not consistent with what we're trying to achieve in terms of the architectural heritage and the types of buildings we have in the town. But, you know, that'd be my pitch. You know, it's, you know, you can see if you look here, this is the variance we're requiring, obviously, where the north face of the building is. And I'm waiting for the surveyor to get back to me now, but, you know, the two Dunsmore buildings are already exceeding that. The dog watch is very close to exceed, it's clearly in the front yard, and the fire station is also within that. And they were all somehow, and there's no precedence to what's happened around you, but it's part of the uniqueness of this area.
if someone else has understood, let's put that to discussion, a quick one here, because I think that there's been an early progression here. We haven't talked about the architecture yet. We talked about the landscape. We talked about the waiver of the landscape architect, and then there's this. Does anyone have a quick comment on you know, the support of the variance?
This is Mark, Mike. Yeah, I could chime in and say that I don't know if we've come across this yet, but in my own practice in both East Haddam and in Groton on the Mystic on the Groton side, where these, you know, Euclidean capricious zoning setbacks were plopped over lots that really don't make sense with what we're being held to, which is to, you know, enforce the architecture of the town. Those boards have supported the relief on the bulk requirements in lieu of the architecture. So I have experienced that before, and this does seem like you know, anybody that would have laid these setbacks over, all you're asking for is a Christmas tree shop on this lot, and I don't know that that's, given land values, where we can really go anymore.
Oh, no, I'm convinced that, you know, the variance is a very good thing. It's just that whether we want to be involved with supporting variance, I mean, there's two different issues there. I agree, you know, it's a hardship, you know, it should be a variance granted. There's no question there.
Yeah, this
is Jenny.
completely.
Oh, go ahead, Leslie. Go.
Yeah, I just say I support the variance because the Christmas tree shop is already in that, you know, it's not 40 feet back. So it's aligned, the new building is aligned with the other buildings, basically the streetscape of Old Stonington Road. So it seems like it wouldn't be a stretch to grant it.
And this is Jenny, just speaking as someone perhaps that doesn't have as much zoning knowledge as other people on the board. I don't feel I would have the background information and specific zoning knowledge to to support or not support, so I'll just recuse myself from that.
Okay.
But based on Rusty's original question, I would think that we could, something could be worded in a way that the architectural review board supported area design, and something that a comment that more addresses the design and support of the design, in that space, but not necessarily a statement that reflects the zoning regulatory side.
And several times in the Mystic Historic District, we've gotten historic district approval that didn't recognize the zoning. And then when we went for variances later, they said, well, there's not one regulatory board. You're not a regulatory board. You're an advisory board. I get that. But, I think the sense is, you could do something like you just said, Chris, where you say, well, look, were they to have to follow the 40-foot setbacks on two sides on a 100-foot lot, what's left for a building, might not meet, wouldn't meet the character of what they're trying to achieve in terms of, representing sexual heritage and all. Anything you could do would be helpful. We like any of these, we get flack from the flanks, from unexpected places, and any minimal support we could get, or just a recognition that, it meets what your objectives are in terms of the general appearance of the building and the proportions, and the fact that it sort of reflects the street frontage that already exists. I mean, we'd appreciate it. We realize it's sort of a stretch and sort of an ask, but once again.
Okay, why don't we move on here? We've got that on the board. I mean, we're going to see you again anyway.
That's correct.
So we've got that noted, duly noted. So can we move on to architecture here and comments?
I'll keep myself unmuted for a minute, and I did have a comment at the entry. We usually try to look at surrounding structures, and I know this is kind of a tough location to get much input from surrounding structures, but any thought process on those? I feel like they can sometimes be hit or miss as far as
I missed a little bit.
as far as a building like this. Any thought that any elaborate from Rusty?
Yeah, no, we've used these numerous times in historic districts. I can take a bunch of pictures and show you the product we're intending to use. I'm not going to say it's like vinyl siding that you can't tell the difference between, the solid board siding we're proposing here. But, I have rarely, I've done a lot of replacement at Connecticut College with the wood columns that have just, gone to dust. And by the time you paint them, and they have, you get the one, if you get the product with the right surface characteristics, in other words, it'll accept paint, and doesn't have a sheen. It's from 12 feet. It's pretty hard to tell till you, get up really close.
Okay. Yeah, that was something that I like I said, and I'm sure some can be a lot less successful than others.
Yeah, no, there's junk product out there. I think what's happened is the AZEK company, which was, pretty good on making moldings, which, they're good manufacturers of those products, and I would say AZEK isn't one of them, but HB&G, yeah, there are products out there that are, pretty hard to distinguish, from any, unless you're, tapping them in the side. But I can get some pictures of other ones we've used. That's not a problem.
Chris, anything on the overall composition, envelope, styling, materials, roof? That we can work out details, but
oh yeah. No, I like the overall design. I think like you mentioned in the beginning, it's a long rectangular building, and I think what did as far as the double gable, you know, is a great way to address that and, you know, do the best, you know, possible under the circumstances. So, but overall, I like the building. I definitely support the design.
On that, the double gable comment works pretty nicely. I think it would be on the, again, back to the conversation about the two sides of the building, both which are public. I mean, I would consider both sides as equal if I were doing this, because I would expect development to occur across, at some point, across Old Stonington Road. So I wouldn't want to detail that north elevation, I believe is what it is, as the back of a building. And I'm sure you wouldn't either. So, but even though there are two gables which distinguish the roof, in plan, that completely goes away. So there's no articulation in plan of the gable. And, you know, you might think about articulating the two gables in plan, the center entry being, you know, in advance or recess of the plan. So you get some more mileage out of that, because it you know, in plan, it's a rectangle, and elevation, it's not. And the other thing I might, that I would think about is that on the south side, you've got the three entries to articulate and provide scale, and the porches to somewhat, and it works together to break it down, to scale down. On the other side, you don't have any of those entries, so it really, to me, there's more that you might be able to think about there. And I realize you have floor plan issues, but one side is probably, it almost just looks like the other side without those entries and detail. And the other thing you kind of grab sometimes in situations for scaling elements, and you have the mechanical penthouse, which I realize this is your diagrammatic here. I mean, there could be something that more focuses your detail with that, as opposed to just an enclosure. And then, you know, there's a possibility that you could use some dormers on the east and west. If when in your studies it looked like that would, you know, be appropriate. So that's just kind of my 5-minute reaction. And, you know, maybe you could consider some of those when you come back and involve those in your next presentation.
Yeah, one of the things, what we're trying to do here is, if you look at the north elevation, we do have a loft sort of space here with full headroom, which we're trying to achieve, because that's a very marketable thing. But it's possible, I don't know how to do that, but yeah, it's possible that, I don't know. Yeah, because there are floor plan constraints, because I've got, you know, a bedroom, a bathroom, and a bedroom, and then a wall here. I mean, I'm not pleased with the fenestration plan here, but yeah, we can take a look at that. I'm not sure within the constraints we have. I'm not sure, you know, trying to get a 2-bedroom apartment above open plan office. I'm not sure how much opportunity we really have. I thought you were going to start to say, well, maybe, you know, try to achieve, you know, some of the entry portals on this side as well. But, you know, I
was going to say that. Okay. Yeah, I think that would make sense too, but obviously that's, you know.
Well, within the constraint of a 900 square foot office space, you know, for instance, the rental space, there's no way you need 2 means of egress and have any kind of wall area and potential layout for offices.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think your idea that dormers has some potential, or, you know, modifying the roof line. I mean, the problem is, they have, you know, the party wall between the two apartments is here, And so I put closets in that location. It's possible I can move the closets or reconfigure the roof line, you know, somewhere here. So it, you know, allows me a little more interest in that side.
Right. I mean, one of the sort of go-to plans for this kind of situation is to have the lobby through the building. And so on the first floor, and you know, you've got priorities. So this is an idea. But if the lobby went through the building, then you know you'd have to make some floor plan changes. But all of a sudden, you'd be introducing entries on the north side of the building. And you know, it's been my experience that even if it's underutilized, that it still has some justification and purpose. So yeah, the client might not think so, but.
No, let me take a look at that. You know, one, come on.
It might be nice, to, Leslie, to have a second exterior egress in office number 1. So
There's no wall space. I mean, we have to have, you know, we have to have room to provide. I mean, already we have a toilet room in the corner here.
mm-hmm.
So we, you know, we have to have room to put off, you know, to, you know, surround it with office. Not all offices are open plan offices like we show here.
Yeah, I know.
And so we have to, you know, leave corners and, you know, space for there to be, and, you know, to get more circulation out.
Mm-hmm.
Steep, and it becomes a fairly steep embankment in this area also. You know, so, you know, you'd have to almost run a walkway right up along the face of the building, but to what effect? I mean, you wouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's 900 square feet is, you know, it's maximum by code, 9 people. There'd be 5 people in this space. Having 2 means of egress in a space that size is, it's cumbersome to a floor layout, put it that way.
This is Jenny. I would think there would be some kind of a fire code that you have to have more than 1 egress per office.
Over 50 occupants.
Okay, thank you.
And we have a single means to the a 2-family doesn't require sprinklers, and you can have a shared single means of egress to a 2-family apartment. So that's why, you know, we've worked that part of it out pretty carefully. One of the thoughts I had in terms of that north wall is possibly instead of the bathroom being, you know, in the middle where it's ideally located, we could possibly look at doing a bathroom, you know, over in this area. It'd be a little more of a hike from the, which would allow us to maybe do some alterations to that facade. It's tough though. You know, within, you know, with this, you know, trying to get as much in this footprint as we're trying to do. I mean, I could look at it.
All right, so other comments here, because we have another application and it's after 7. So I don't want to cut anybody short here, but we should move this along.
Well, depending on how things go tomorrow night, we may not be back to see you anyway. But so let me, yeah, that's our next hurdle. Any help you could provide or any suggestion that, you know, a building that met zoning might be awkward in terms of the allowable setbacks would be very much appreciated. And, you know, in the meantime, we'll, you know, engage our, you know, assuming we get things proceed tomorrow, we'll engage our site engineer and get going on the drainage and the landscape architect who can work in tandem in terms of, you know, dealing with the wet areas we have. Actually, this is the very driest point in that whole area because it's the highest point.
Yeah, I think Keith can probably give you, you know, if you want some guidance as to what we've felt were successful landscape architect and thoughtful presentations about an integrated site with continuity. I think Keith can maybe unearth 1 or 2, you know,
Sure.
for guidance.
No, I have several I've worked with, and, you know, I'm sure, you know, I'll talk that over with Keith.
Okay.
Because he and I are going to be having a lot of conversations, assuming we get through tomorrow and proceed with the site plan development.
All right. Well, listen, good luck with your presentation, and you know, thank you for your diligence with this and flexibility. Good
Mike,
luck.
I wonder if we couldn't endorse, shall we say, which is a light level endorsement, endorse the spirit of the application for variance in order to allow for more appropriate massing and articulation of the structure at hand, given the zoning constraints?
But I don't know why we couldn't. It seems like it, people are sympathetic to that. So just, keep it general, pretty much, as you said, then,
Yeah.
we could go down in writing on that as it's a the variance allows, favorable architecture and site development to occur.
If you can do that, I'm going to work with you hand and fist for the rest of this stuff. How's that?
Yeah. Be careful what you say.
I know this is recorded. This is words.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we could, Keith, can we can achieve that in some memo, or how do we do that?
Sure, that's something I can put together.
Okay.
It's a consensus of the board and send it to the zoning board of appeals.
Okay.
There won't be much. There won't be any time to really go back and forth and review drafts and all that because the meeting's tomorrow night. But I'll put something together.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So
Thanks very much.
with that, we'll adjourn the meeting and start the next. Okay. Thank you, Rusty.
Au revoir. Thanks very much.
Rusty?
Thank you.
Good luck tomorrow, Rusty.
Okay, so I believe we're ready to move on to, I don't know if we have the applicant here, but I guess we have the architect. So we need to move on to the next application, which is ADRD 2005G, a new structure and associated site improvements at 32 Broadway Avenue in Mystic. So who's the presenter here? Is it Sergio? I don't see anyone out there. Maybe.
Yeah, Michael, I had a question. When you presented the Wattawatic Boathouse many years ago.
Oh, hi, Mark. Yeah. Yeah.
Were you on the board?
No. No, I was actually applying to be on the board, so I was familiar with, but I wasn't officially on the board.
Okay, I asked that because, I've had many applications come to the board here, and I can't speak at all. And when I go to other boards, like the Groton side, Todd Brady, I'm working with him on Factory Square, and he's on the board, and he recused himself, but he was allowed to have commentary. And Keith and I spoke about this today. I completely understand the imagery that this could have, but I just had an opinion where I recuse myself from the vote, because we might all have this, come up in the future, where the member recuses themselves from the vote. Do we want to maintain that the member shall not speak during the presentation, or how do we feel about that as a board?
Well, yeah, I think that I think the ultimate decision is up to you, because you and your the application, your developer, the applicant is that's where the liability is. It's not with us. I mean, also we've kind of, as long as we make it clear to you, at least my understanding, what the option is, and that if you go ahead and present and you recuse yourself, it's a lot better than, obviously, than presenting and voting. No one would do that, right? In their right mind.
Right.
So, so Yeah, I mean, I would have the same situation, right, coming in front of the town if I ever did any work here. And it's not that you would ever have a conflict of interest. You know, it's just the quote unquote apparent conflict of interest that if some, you know, well-meaning activist citizen out there decided to say, what are you guys doing? You know, you're having, you know, you're subject to your own members kind of swaying your opinions. So I think it's entirely up to you. I don't know what Keith has to add to that, but I think it's your decision what you want to do.
This is Keith, and I think, Michael, your you know, what you're saying is sort of spot on with this. You know, planning and zoning board of appeals written into state law that you can participate in the meeting. With other boards like this, you know, obviously you can't vote on it. The town has a conflict of interest ordinance that was passed decades ago that prohibits that sort of bad behavior about someone voting on something that interests them financially or otherwise. But like you said, a lot of it just comes down to the public perception of it. You know, the public trust element of it. So, you know, that's often what it comes down to here.
But just for Mark's sake, I do know, and, you know, we have to, in our business, you have to always consider the worst case, unfortunately. And I do know of situations in Stonington where there have been people out there, not so much now maybe, Mark, as before, who will come forth and, you know, they will determine that there is something that they should hire an attorney for and investigate because there's an apparent conflict of interest. And I mean, that has happened with an architect, with the town attorney being brought in. And so, you know, but I'm sure it's, I mean, I don't know, whoever had any, I don't think we've ever had an architect present, because I didn't present, to your point, when I presented before for the boathouse. So.
I'd like to add something to that. This is Leslie. Mark, you sat out for the Bravo Bravo restaurant. And I think as an advocate to your client, it's important for you or any of you on the board to present the plans and defend the design and answer questions that the other members of the board would have. And then maybe not vote on the final say, but still be present to prepare, you know, advocate for the client, what their intent is and what the drawings convey and what the design conveys.
This is Jenny. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I would just say that
the only problem with that is just keep in mind that if I'm an attorney, I'm going to say that there are other people that could have done a similar job in presenting, maybe not the same, but that's, you know, but hey, that's the last I have to say about it. Sounds, you know, it's up to you.
I mean, I fully understand you have a great point. Keith made the point earlier. With the last thing we want is to be on the front page of the day tomorrow.
No.
So with that said, Sergio is one of the best, and I'm going to turn it over to Sergio and let him take it over.
Okay, I hope I wasn't, you know, I'm game for anything here. I'm not trying to advocate anything. I just want to make it clear, you know, for your sake.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up though. Can we ask Mark questions after the presentation? I feel like that would be appropriate, or am I wrong?
I think that's maybe a good compromise. I mean, you know, so we make it clear he didn't present, but he was there to answer questions. I mean, you know, why don't we do it that way? And then, you know, we can sort of back into that he wasn't a presenter, but he was present.
I personally think that's a fair compromise.
Okay. You all right with that? I mean, do you
Yeah,
have
I think that's I think that's great because Sergio is very well versed in what we did here, but at the same time, the building's born out of my head, and there might be some technical things that you guys want to ask that there will be texting in the background anyway, so that sounds good to me, and hopefully there won't be any.
Yeah, all right.
With that, should I get started, or do you guys want to deliberate a little more on this? And can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hi, Sergio. Yes, it's Michael. And please start your presentation.
We've had to navigate, things like this. I mean, we've been accused of and falsely colluding with staff on certain projects that just get a litany of public scrutiny. So I appreciate the sensitivity to this, and we obviously don't want to be accused of any special treatment. But to that effect, I'm going to do my best to present Mark's design. It was really born out of a lot of site considerations, so that's what I'm going to lead with. I'm going to probably butcher his narrative and rely on him if there's any questions, but I'll lead the discussion, and then I think it's a fair compromise that if there's any specific questions that Mark can weigh in. So for the record, Sergio Cerenzia with Cerenzia Associates. I prepared the documents along with Mark Camo, the architect that are before you in this application this evening. My office is Cerenzia Associates, located at 99 Mechanic Street in Pawcatuck. Prepared both the land survey and the engineered site plans, which are not complete yet, but are they're a little bit more than a conceptual, little more conceptual nature, but don't have the detail that we will be presenting once we get to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Just for the record, I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. If I may, I'm going to share my contents of my screen. If I can get this to work here. Right now, you should be seeing just the GIS of the site, 32 Broadway Avenue. And I should mention I'm here representing my client, G Development LLC. Unfortunately, Fodi Georgiadis, who is the principal of this development company, couldn't be here this evening. He got tied up in New York with some other business. But the property that we are the subject of the application in front of you, 32 Broadway Ave. Zoom in here. I think most of you are familiar with it. I'm not sure if there's someone that might need to getting some background noise. I think it's stopped now. Okay, it's the old the service station located on the corner of Washington Street and Broadway Avenue. To the south, I think you all are very familiar, is the Mystic Fire Department. To the north, across Washington Street, is the M-Bar, which was also a service station that was renovated to a restaurant. And across the way, I believe this structure has actually been demolished. It's just a grass area, and I think I can pull up I'll give you a little context here. If you can see my screen, you can see the tanks have been exhumed from the ground. That's been taken care of. The fire department to the south, the M-Bar to the north. The street, it is a vacant lot with a Shell station in the back there. So I'm going to switch over to my survey. So just to note, this is the property survey which we prepared. As you can see, the Washington Street, Broadway to the east, Washington Street to the north. The building, actually, the existing building is currently pre-existing non-conforming, and it encroaches into one of the front yard setbacks on Washington Street. I think many of you will be familiar when this gas station did operate. It's kind of a free-for-all for traffic, 2 curb cuts, people just driving in and back out. Not a lot of traffic control. And also this area to the south here, it's actually owned by the Amtrak. It's an old railroad spur, which this property had encroached upon, and using that for parking. You could see that actually. We go back to the GIS. You could see if I can zoom in. There's trouble here. You can see the cars that pretty much just acquiesce to parking in that area, as well as other spaces on the lot in recent past. I also failed to mention the lot to the west, which is developed with the Mystic Junction, multiple buildings, all very all impervious, very congested area with buildings right on top of each other. So I'll just go back to the survey. I think everyone's got a pretty good idea of the context that we are working with. It's a 7,734 square foot lot, located in an LS5 zone, which requires a 5,000 minimum square foot area for the.
Excuse me, Sergio.
Yep.
I don't know about anybody else. I can't see the survey. It's just gray. I don't know if that's just me or if other people can
It's
see
not
it.
showing up.
Okay. We could see everything else, but just not the survey.
Yeah, it says it's starting to share content. Hold on. Let me see if I can toggle. Thanks, Keith. Let me see if I can toggle to the next one. I could stop sharing and try to reshare it if that will. Maybe that'll. You try that, Keith. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
That worked. Well, I've switched over to now the proposed drawing. So what I said earlier, that the site was really the driver of the architectural, the building itself on this site. My client wanted to have the ability to maximize the parking on this site, and to get the building, the size of the building that would fit on this site, in addition to the necessary parking to maximize it. We opted to elevate the structure and be able to drive under it. Now, this serves 2 purposes. One, it does afford us some additional parking, but also it allows us to better conform to the flood code standards. This property has a base flood elevation, I believe it's 11, and the site grade is around elevation 6. So we would be elevating this building at least 5 feet, if not more, probably closer to 6 feet, just to meet the flood code standards, and then require an ADA ramp. And when Mark started the project, before I took the lead and said, well, we got to hold up on designing the building, to Mark's chagrin, and that I had to drive the architecture of the building, which I'm sure none of you like to hear from engineers. But it really was an exercise which he and I went through to optimize the location of the building, to make sure that things like traffic flow, flood elevation, parking, as well as landscaping, all mesh together on this very, very tight lot. So you'll see we have two entrances, two access to the site. And you can tell by the arrow, what the thought was is that as you're traveling on Broadway, at least in a northerly direction, excuse me, that this free-for-all with the two curb cuts going in and out of the service station, we'd like to venture into closing those off and just creating one exit from the site. So that would be the one way out, even though we have a 24-foot width. That's to accommodate the parking. But what we'd like to see, or what the intent was, that anyone traveling on Washington Street, on Broadway, could turn onto Washington Street, and if there was a queuing issue, at least you have either direction. Because if people are queuing here, they're backing up traffic, and we know that on a busy day in Mystic, especially with the bridge being up, traffic can back up pretty far. So we would try to get people off the street onto Washington Street, and then they have that time to make that turn off of Washington Street and go right underneath the building. And I believe in your packet you'll see a similar building that we did this in. It's a larger scale, but Maria's Restaurant and Hotel in Westerly is a nice example of driving, the ability to drive under the building and park under the building. So the layout of the parking and the traffic lended itself to this, really gave this design to take shape. Not only that, but when you go to design a building with parking underneath, you have to take into account where the pillars are going to go. And so Mark and I had to work closely together to make sure that those pillars laid out in a way that still allowed traffic to run through, but also to make sure that these spaces were utilized in a manner that people can still get in and out. Next was finding a place for the elevator and the stairs. Obviously, if we push the building back any further, we would have no place to drop the stairs. So we utilized the space in the front that we still had some setback to work in, or outside of rather. And we have the elevator and the stairs, which became the facade of the building as you approach it from Broadway Avenue. So it's still walkable to get into the building from that point, right into an elevator or stairs up to the first elevated floor. So the remaining areas are going to serve for what little, a little bit of stormwater retention, which will be, I'm assuming, be landscaped attractively, especially being on the corner of Broadway and Washington. It's kind of a focal point of the building. I'm sure that we're going to have something low there that won't detract from the building but complement it. Same thing, we'll have a little bit of landscaping, not necessarily by our retention area, but it could be. And then we've really opened up some landscaping, and albeit that these are dead spaces, but it'll still allow us to have some screening from this building back here. And if you go back, let's see if this will work. It's going to go gray again, I think.
It is gray.
Yeah, I'm not having luck toggling between my screens, unfortunately. Let's see if I can try sharing it back again here. Sorry about this. Okay, I think we're back. So there's the building in the back, which is about 2 or 3 feet, I think, a few feet off the. We'll be looking to screen that from the rear so that it's not seen from either the street or hopefully block it from the street as well as from the patrons that are going to be in the building. And I'm going to try to probably unsuccessfully bring up switch screens again. Let's see what happens. Back to gray. What I'm going to do here is go to the building next. Let me see if I get off to toggle it back and forth again. Excuse me. So I will make note that on the building here, before I go to Mark's architectural plans, we are going to reserve a spot that we can get some loading in, a small loading zone with buildings under, I believe, 5,000 square feet. The P&Z Commission has the ability to waive the requirement if it's a use that does not require it. We would at least try to, I fight this every project that I'm on, that a 50 foot by whatever feet the loading zones have to be for some of these smaller uses to get some relief on that. But in this case, I believe we can either have it waived or hopefully have it reduced to a modest size delivery truck that would be for this use. The other thing is a dumpster area. We're going to hopefully be able to find an area to store trash and recycling bins underneath the building in an area that would be conducive to it, and not have to take up a landscaped area to do a fenced-in dumpster area, depending on what the final use of the building is. So I'm going to go to the architectural plans. You can see Mark has mimicked my site plan on his first sheet. And if I'm going to start with the east elevation, sorry about that. Okay, so now here's where I'm probably going to do my best to articulate Mark's points on the building which he's designed. As we mentioned, it's the former service station. It's been decommissioned. Is minimally structural and is not built to current flood code and code regulations. So this building will be elevated so that it will meet and exceed and actually be conservative with respect to the flood code. The property is within the Drawbridge Historic District. And in order to maintain, as I mentioned before, the parking, that was what's driving the size, the orientation, and the location of the building. The architecture, I believe you can read in the narrative, but Mark's narrative reads the lower part is proposed to be of Cambridge brick with slotted coined corners and transitions to a more contemporary expression, using Prodema panel cladding in order to resonate the progressive steps apparent in Stonington's approvals, similar to the Seaport Visitors Building, Hartford Health, and the proposed Seaport Hotel. So in my conversations with Mark as we were developing this, we didn't want another M-bar across the street. We're not renovating an old service station. This is a new building, and although it's going to have some historic context, it's going to be a more progressive building and have some more contemporary aspects to it. Mark has alluded to the fact that, that service stations, albeit that, they're older when they were first built, they are a little bit more modern structure representing the auto industry moving forward. And that we're taking, I don't know if he would say taking a risk with this, but getting a little bit more architectural components that are more contemporary and forward thinking. He said the step back gable on the elevator rise pays homage to the same detail once on the neighboring Packer Soap Building and the Rossi Mill. The context of the structure in a segment of the Mystic transect warrants the design approach, massing, overall scale, fenestration, and clean lines. So this is the elevation that's facing Broadway Ave. There is the south elevation. This is what would be seen obviously from the south, from the fire station. You'll notice it's a raised 2-story structure. I've already been reading some buzz on this on some Facebook community posts saying, is this going to be a 4-story structure? Technically, it's a raised 2-story structure with a rooftop deck. This 3rd story is not considered by definition a story because it's not enclosed. A portion of it maybe have some roofed over, but the building will meet all gross floor area requirements, as well as parking requirements. We've been going through numerous different scenarios of different types of uses, from brew pubs to restaurants to retail. And right now we have 16 spaces to work with. So this building may change in size depending on what the final use is to accommodate the parking. We are seeking to potentially do some off-site parking, but that is yet to be determined in some of the adjacent parcels, possibly approaching M-Bar or the firehouse to see if there's any opportunity to get some additional parking in the vicinity that could help us to uphold the size and scale of the building. But we're not maxing out by any means our gross floor area. It's just a matter of making sure that we have a use that we can make sure we get enough parking on. So with that, we fully intend to have a landscape architect involved. I don't intend on asking for a waiver on that. I would have, had Chris Thorpe, but then 2 people would have had to recuse themselves tonight. So we haven't enlisted the services of a landscape architect yet. Given the nature of the property, that it's all impervious right now, anything that we do, I would hope would be considered an improvement, but it still needs to be done right. And we hope the massing and the scale of the landscaping will be inviting for people that are walking as well as driving to this destination. So with that, as I said, I probably butchered Mark's portion of the presentation. But if you have any questions of me and or Mark,
that's great, Sergio. Well done. And maybe I could just start by asking the members if they have any questions about the project architecture or whatever, and then we can get maybe a response from Mark.
No questions yet, but I'll comment a little later on.
Okay.
I guess it's Leslie. I have one question. If you don't know what the use is going to be yet, how can you be sure that you won't change the facade based on some future use idea? I mean, it's a beautiful building, but whether it's retail or brew pub, apartments, or that could change the fenestration and.
Mark may want to chime in, but the only thing I can offer is if we make any significant changes, we would not be opposed to coming back. We obviously would love to have your consent and approval, but if there's something that concerns you, that if there's a change of use, we could bring it back to your board for consideration.
This is Jenny. I would think that would be a very wise idea.
And I don't see a a west or a north elevation. I wonder if that brick wraps all the way around that column, or if it just wraps part way like it does in the south. Like what's happening to the building on that side?
That sounds like a time to chime in.
Go ahead, Mark.
So first of all, we have one of the area's very prominent brewers that our client's been talking to about the space. COVID has affected their business plan quite a bit. We still think that a brew pub here will fit this part of Mystics Transect. And you know, Acme Wire is our neighbor right across the street, and something industrial would be a great fit there. So that's the direction we're going in. If the use changed at all, it would be a different building, and this approval would go out the window, and we would have to come back. So we would definitely acquiesce to that. The north elevation is just the south flipped. So the Cambridge brick sticks up against the building as you see it on both sides. So I didn't. It's just a drafting exercise to have done the north elevation. The west elevation, your back is up against our concrete block neighbor to the west, and it would, if you look at the left side of the south elevation that's up, you'll see the skirting of the metal roof on the top on both sides, and really no fenestration because we're only a parking space away from concrete block there.
Mm-hmm.
So with the final application, there will be 4 full elevations. So is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'll just dive in with a few comments. I think it's commendable what you did in terms of the massing. I think with a corner lot, there's a lot of pressure to articulate that corner well, and I think the elevator volume does that. And I think there's the suggestions of the industrial past. I think there's a challenge with the scale of the building on the site. And I think you should be commended for getting as much parking as you have on the site. I just have some reservations about the amount and variety of detailing that's on this relatively small scale building. And I think the context is probably what I'm concerned most about. If you step back across the street and see this sort of density of detail on this relatively small building volume, I would like to see you pick sort of a few of the most powerful detailing aspects and use it more cohesively. I think especially the south, and now that we know the north elevation, have a variety of window openings, and there's that mansard roof reflection on the side that I just don't understand why that was added. I think overall massing, this is really great. I just think there's a lot going on.
This is Jenny, but just to add to that idea, on the east elevation, although it's interesting that the paneling, the wood-like paneling, that could even continue with brick all the way up, which might take away one sort of extraneous surface and pull it together a little more. Just a thought.
I like all the detail that I see. I don't see enough of that in some new buildings that have a richness of texture and variety. And I like that mansard scoop because that puts the person, when someone's up on that deck, just steps them, forces them to step back from that concrete building.
That's good.
And then they're not like looking over the abyss down to the parking lot so much.
And this is Jenny again. I do like the detail near the roof, the small windows and the X's, because it kind of ties in a little bit with the railroad station, which is in that same neighborhood. Just a little Victoriana or something.
This
Okay,
is
Chris?
Chris Delaney. Yeah, I agree with most of the sentiment here that the massing is great, and I also want to point out the modern challenge associated with flood floodplain buildings and dealing with them in different ways. It's just a new reality, but I felt like given the circumstances, it's really well done. I will ask a question about is there a possibility of getting any more of a detailed rendering with the final application? Because of, I think what a couple people pointed out, there is a lot of different textures going on here, and maybe getting a better feel for how they all might work together in a more detailed view would probably be helpful.
Okay. So,
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think the idea on the elevator piece was to almost, it's kind of a big rectangular building, and I was glad that the site turned it perpendicular to what's going to be a building across the street, which runs parallel to Broad. So I think that it's going to be a nice juxtaposition of the massing to the building that's not built yet on the Hendel property, former Hendel property. And we've got the concrete on the bottom, not much of it, but I wanted the elevator tower to almost make you wonder, was that here? And then did they refurbish it and tack this otherwise, regularly detailed building onto it? So that was the idea behind it. The recessed arch in the Cambridge brick would be brick, so it would only show up in a shadow line. And then the recesses with the X in them would be iron in the wood paneling, and they'd be painted such a dark green that it would almost be black. So it would have I think a really nice, classy. It would be the detail of the building, and really the only color, because the rest of it would kind of look like Bravo. It would just be white and black, where this would have a little bit of color to introduce. So I'm just saying that because that was my brainchild, I guess I'd say.
I like it.
I think one challenge which the architect and landscape architect and Sergio, who's wears all hats, is how to make that ground plane really pedestrian oriented. And there's a lot of cars there, but there are also a lot of cars on the street. And I don't know how you're going to do this, but I think it would be fascinating because of the building is elevated and open. So there's this, and it has a front door. So there's actually, even though it's elevated, the use is really for 3 parking spaces and a drive-through. So it's obviously traffic driven. Is there some way the columns, the finish of the columns, the lighting on the columns, interior lighting underneath that space, and paving and the flow to make it really attractive and not invite people there, because I know that's not going to serve your purpose as general traffic. But I mean, it is true from the site plan that I'm looking at that the elevator and the stair appear to be open to the underside. I mean, in other words, you access those not only from the Broadway, but from underneath. So I'm just saying, is there bring architecture underneath there too. I think it would be really cool on the corner to have something that was more than an elevated building, which I'm sure you agree. That's one point. And the other one is I would agree with Chris, both Chris's, but Chris Thorpe comment that there's you know the experimentation and menu of materials is really I find it really progressive and welcoming. Certainly in contrast to the last project, not to be disparaging, that we saw. You know, because the last project we saw was, I mean, that could have been, you know, a Masonic assisted living facility, or it could have been a veterinary, or it could have been a daycare center. We've seen the same stuff brought forward in language. And this, you know, represents a real kind of an adventurous departure. I would tone it down. If I had done this, I'd say I got everything here I need to make this successful. And I think about, you know, how to simplify and use the same language, but you know, make it a little bit more, maybe more continuity, but still keep that playfulness. And that's all just architectural talk. But I think it's worth saying. And then the other thing that's cool about it, which it seems maybe it's evolving, has something to do with how that building comes down to the ground at the elevator lobby and stair lobby, is there's this, when I saw the plan, I thought, oh man, this is coming right out of, you know, modernist architecture, where you have a stair lobby element to a building rises up, and that's expressed in plan and elevation. And you've kind of done that, but then it's broken apart a little bit on the elevation, and you know, and which is interesting. I think there's something that, in other words, that lobby doesn't express itself in the elevations, except maybe just on the corner. But I mean, there's, you know, I'd be very happy in that there's a lot of really good ideas here. I think that it's a great chemistry, and that, you know, I think you can do more work on it.
I think you raise a great point about the pedestrian connectivity to the building. And as you were saying that, Michael, the first thing I thought of was perhaps a way to assuage everybody's ideas would be to replace the concrete on the bottom with the Prodema paneling. And then what you probably can't see, because I shut the layer off, is that the stairs rise up behind those windows to the third floor, but it's hidden by the concrete on the first floor. So maybe we use the Prodema on the base level to replace the concrete, but glaze it down on the street facade, so the stair does become this element that goes from the grade all the way up to the top and gives you better connectivity to it. That's what popped into my mind the minute you started saying that. So I think there are ways that we can stick with the palette that we've got, but maybe control it a little bit more.
This is Jenny. I like that idea, and I think being able to see the stairs going all the way up would also connect it with the past and industrial connections. That would be neat.
Okay. Other comments? Chris Thorpe hasn't. Has Chris Thorpe commented complete? Yes, he has. He may.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. You have anything else to say, Chris?
I didn't mention anything about the site. There's a little, you know, undefined nature of that planting on the corner. I think it merits the most thought out response from the planting aspect, is most visible. And I think you hit on it, Michael, with the ground plane. This is, it's almost 100% site. And, you know, the architecture lives above it. And I think the connection between the clearly public space and the sort of semi-public space below the building is critical. And I think there's a great opportunity to bring a lot of life to this corner.
Right. And it almost is, you know, it is a tower. If we wanted to stretch it, you know, you could go back to Italy or Florence and look at the campanile and that sort of thing. And on the corner here, it would be great to have just to spend, you know, the rest of the developers' money. You could do something in a paving at the sidewalk plane at that corner that would reinforce. Let's see, is that brick? You know, something that was expressive and very memorable of just that corner, you know, to make it a real place. Just an idea, but, you know, that's what we're here for. Other comments?
Just Jenny, with that first floor where just the concrete sort of stucco wall is, the window could have the X bar pattern as the same sort of doorways up on the wooden facade, but they could be clear glass, and you know, just because it would give a harmony to repeat that window down near the bottom as well, or that X. And you've got the X's at the top, but there really aren't any near the base of the building. But to bring one down there with clear glass might be fun.
Okay. So I think we're, Keith, tell me what the future is here. We're going to see this application come back with, my understanding is a landscape architect and the appropriate drawings, and then more architectural drawings.
Right, and I'm not sure that was the applicant's intention, but they haven't applied to planning and zoning, to the Planning and Zoning Commission yet, so there is time for this to come back with any revisions that the board wants to see.
Well, I don't think we can, you know, if we stay true to form, even if we had no issues with or comments on the architecture, there still is not the landscape plan. The absence of that, I think, makes this unapprovable. That's
right. Unless you.
Yeah, I'm sure Sergio and I had no problem treating this as a workshop and getting the feedback. It was really great, and I think it paves the way also to do a 3D rendering, which I just could not get done for tonight. And we can come back with the 3D rendering and everything buttoned up, and then I think at the next meeting there will be no reason for me to really have to talk, because I think you've gotten the questions out of me, and you know where I'm coming from with this. So I think we're in a good place. Sergio, what do you think?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Keith, if we say we hit the next submittal deadline for planning and zoning, whether it be a special use permit or site plan review, depending on what use we go with, we will still have enough time to get in front of this board before we go in front of the commission. Wouldn't that be correct?
Right. You could come back to this board after you submitted an application to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay. But we would, the order of, we would want to come here to get an advisory opinion to P&Z before we got to that meeting, correct?
Right. You'd have to get feedback from this board prior to a Planning and Zoning Commission decision.
Mm-hmm.
And ideally, you'd get this board's comments before even applying to PZC, but you don't have to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I would, so you wouldn't make our planning and zoning approval conditional upon a architectural review board review and advisory, or you really?
Right. It should be that this board, makes a decision before planning and zoning.
Yeah, I'd rather have a resounding, yes, we love it. We give our opinion that this is a great design, and before we go into P&Z, and give more detail as you pointed out, as this board's pointed out on some of the landscape areas. We understand that this plan is lacking. Mark and I worked pretty quickly to pull this together, and we put a lot of thought into the layout and the space planning to meet zoning code as to the closest as we can, taking a site that's completely impervious and trying to introduce not only some green space, some landscaping, some drainage design work, but and I think that shows. But I think the devil's going to be in the details, and we'll come back with more of that. The only thing is, Mark, are you all set with the commentary that's been the comments that have been tonight? All constructive, I may add. If with what your task is moving forward.
Yeah, I think very, very constructive. What I wanted to hear, I would say, as Michael said, in light of the previous application, this isn't completely out on the edge, but at the same time, we're trying, Bravo was this is what you need to do in the middle of a downtown context as an architect. This is leaving the transect, and we're having a little fun with it, and it sounds like everybody is on board with that. And I think that the recommendations and comments you'll definitely see in the final product that I listened in, and these things will come through.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I can sort of sense that because this is a departure from what a lot of people are used to in Mystic and surrounds. There could be some questions from the public and the public hearing on this as to the nature of the architecture and why it doesn't look like this or A, B, or C. So I think it certainly behooves us to all be on the same page or website, whatever. Because we're going to prove this. There are no big red flags, but I would underscore, the comments we've made about the continuity and uniformity, because I think that's kind of a theme that came from three of us.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
So with that being said, Keith, the minutes of this meeting, and it's been recorded, that'll be available for us just if we need to go back and refer back to it.
Right. The whole video meeting will be recorded.
Great.
And up on the website either tomorrow or the next day.
Excellent. I'm sure Mark's got it all. He's already probably making changes in his mind and getting ready to move this forward. So we will. I think that's with that. I think we're all set unless any further questions for us.
I don't think so. We'll close this part of the meeting. Thank you, Mark and Sergio.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark and Sergio.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is, was there something inserted as another item, Pete? Was it Breck Perkins' application, or is that something we're supposed to talk about? I'm sure everyone has to go here.
That was his application to be a member of the board.
Right.
So that will be before.
All right,
it's not on our agenda, but that'll be something the Board of Selectmen will have to decide on.
Okay, fine. And then meeting minutes, right?
Meeting minutes, I'm not sure if I sent those out to you, and I was unable to check.
I haven't seen them. I don't-
Okay, so we might want to pass on those until next time. Sorry about that.
It's a good thing I didn't say I got them, I reviewed them, I approved them. Well, really? Okay. So, anyone have any further business? No.
No business.
Okay. There, move to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Aye. Okay, we are officially adjourned.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.